Council has assembled. They are eager to hear your report.
Good evening. We begin tonight's meeting of the Council by calling the Council to order. Hello, and thank you everyone for joining us. The Council is a live Twitch talk show and podcast discussing Star Wars: The Old Republic. I am Elise, and with me are my fellow Council members, Redna.
Hi.
Magic Ace.
What's up?
And Sakari.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Tonight, we are going to talk about the exciting topic of gearing.
Gearing in SWTOR, indeed.
It is exciting for some of us. Okay, don't say it like that.
And not for others. Ain't that the truth?
And over for others as well.
It's kind of like taxes. It's exciting for some people and a bummer for others. After our live broadcast, you can find our recorded episodes everywhere podcasts are found and on our YouTube channel. Just click on the panel below and visit our website at thecouncilswotor.com. Check out our social media. I can speak, I promise. Social media. And don't forget to follow us on Twitch. You can also find our Facebook page, facebook.com/councilswotor, and also on Twitter at thecouncilswotor. Wait, there's more. You can also find us at the Patreon page at patreon.com/thecouncilswotor, and just Google us anywhere or the Magic Ace, because I'm kind of connected.
We've taken over Google. That's awesome to hear. Glad to hear that.
Awesome.
Yes,
You just
indeed.
have to look at Google and we'll just pop up. Okay, maybe not that good, but
We're working on it, though, right?
we're working on it.
All right, so the icebreaker for tonight. As everybody knows, the icebreaker is just a question just to kind of get the discussion started. So tonight, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much attention do you give to increasing your character's gear level ratings? Or gear ratings levels, I suppose.
Go, Redna, go.
Let us start with Elise, because I'm pretty sure that's going to be a short answer.
I know, which is why I didn't want to go with her first. I would have ready to go for a while.
Well, we can flip it. I could care.
Magic is fixated on me
caring.
going first, always, so we'll wait.
On a scale of 1 to 10, I assume 1 is about the same level as looking at what's underneath my fingernails, and 10, I don't like. I can't sleep
Obsession.
because I want to.
Yes.
I have to get to 248 or whatever it is.
Yes.
I would say that it is like maybe a 2. I enjoy it when I open up a CXP box and I get a set piece. A new one.
When you don't
I'm impressed, so it's above 1.
But other than that, it's much like it's much less than, say, if I got a deco in there or
Right.
a die pack that I really wanted or something.
So
I mean,
so you are okay with receiving pieces. Just if RNG gives you one, heck yeah, that's awesome. But apart from that, you will do nothing to pursue it whatsoever.
correct.
Okay.
And I do roll during operations that I do on stuff I don't have.
Okay.
So, I do that. So I can't really call it a 1. But
All hail Wog. At least it's only hope.
But you don't get mad if you don't get it as well. Like, oh man, I was
no,
hoping for
and
that.
as a matter of fact, I will oftentimes not even roll and pass if I already have it already on my 2 tunes that I'm most likely thing on. I don't do that whole I'm going to roll for an alt. I never remember to pull that crap out. I don't want to spend all that money to put it in something else when more than likely I won't use it.
Right.
So,
Right.
See, I'll usually roll anyway, just so that I can give it to someone in the group that I like.
That's your
Yeah, I'm
contribution on
fucking it.
Master Looter.
probably the roll. I got it. That's cool.
Magic, what about you?
Well, since I'm the only one here who seems to be excited about this question, I'll give it a go. On a scale from 1 to 10, how much attention do I give? Well, it totally depends on the class, completely. Like, me gearing my Juggernaut and Marauder is, like, the lowest priority. That's, like, 2. And I'm sorry you can hear my daughter run into the house. She's really excited about something. But,
She's excited about gearing in SWTOR.
She's so excited. She loves that gear. Actually, she does. She thinks it's pretty. If it's a DPS like my Merc, I give it about a 4. If it's my heal classes, like 10 or 10 plus, if there's higher on the scale, I'm like all like, yes, scare this baby out. But the problem is I don't have time to get money. I never have. I've never had a cash cow. Anytime I've had over 20 million in my bank, it's been because I've sold something on the GTN. So I really have no money ever. I'm always like looting everything I can possibly loot because I need every dang credit and everything I can sell. So gearing is expensive and I can't afford it all the time. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll wait for stuff in crates and then I'll use my components and up it, which has taken me a long time, much to the frustration of some people, like that I do it this way. And I'm like, well, unless you're going to, bankroll me, I don't think it's going to happen. So with my 700K, and let me tell you, it's freaking expensive. Sorry. Let me tell you, it's freaking expensive. So long story short, if I had unlimited credits, they would all be 10s. But since I don't, there's a level on what it is. So for healers, 10.
Right. All right, I guess I'm next in this. Somebody put me, or maybe I did. I don't know. But okay, let's talk about my gear grind. I
know who did it.
I'm actually, let me see, I would say probably about a 4 for me. I am reasonably casual about it because I think you can achieve 242 rated stuff pretty, just by getting a character up the levels. I have some strategies I use for how I use my unassembled components. So it works itself out. If I'm gearing a character, working on their CXP, I can get them into 242s pretty easily. 228 augments without an issue. I abhor the work that has to be done for max level stuff. Oh my god. It's like, what? I'm supposed to do group ranked? I don't even do regular ranked. How am I going to do group ranked? So we have a lot to discuss tonight at least. But yeah, I'd say about 4 for me. I'm decently easygoing on the gear grind. All right, Redna, I suspect that you're last for a reason.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, I would classify myself at a snowball.
All right.
Because that's how you get here. I learned this over Christmas. Throw a bunch of snowballs, get yourself max geared. That's all it takes.
Yeah,
CXP can be earned by throwing snowballs. So essentially, it's the most idiotic system in place in all of MMO history.
I actually enjoyed that. That was like throwing snowballs.
I know. Waiting in queues, Elise is like, wait. Oh, I found one. Oh, I found one.
It was like my favorite thing for
Her voice chat was like blowing up. She's like, oh, yes, I got one. Oh, it's gone. Oh, yes, I got one.
It was my favorite thing to do. It was so awesome. I'm like, I'll do it.
I am amazed at different people's experience of this game, what they think is fun. Because to me, like, snowballs is something I do while I'm waiting around just for the extra whatever. But there are some people like, heck yeah, it's life day. I'm gonna get the launcher and start.
I had a drink. I think it was after maybe WOG and Magic had logged out, and Kirk and I were just chilling, chatting, having drinks, and throwing. And like he'd be like, "Oh, there's one over here," and we'd like run over. And it was like I did that for like an hour and a half. I had to like make myself stop. It's so bad. Anyway, go on.
So, Redna, you're saying that you hate the system to the point where you wouldn't even put yourself anywhere on the scale of 1 to 10?
Oh, the existing system, we'll get into exactly how we go about it.
Like a -3?
But I suspect that snowball is the proper answer for our straw poll results, honestly.
All right. Well, let's. Do we want to talk about the straw poll, Elise?
Okay. So this week, we asked everyone to take a look at their highest character's profile, their like average gear rating, and to tell us what it was. The categories were less than 230. What is it? Plus or minus 230? Plus or minus 236?
230 plus or equal.
Yep.
236 plus or equal.
Plus or equal 230, plus or equal 236, plus or equal 242, and 248.
Now that corresponds to each of the levels at which you get a set bonus, right? You get your set bonuses at 230, 236, 242, 248. There are pieces that you can get that are between that, like blues and greens, that maybe increases.
Right.
But
These
those
are
are generally the
referred to as the tier levels. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4. I thought that Tier 1 was gone, but then I was informed that actually Tier 1 is still included for created characters.
It is still legitimate, yes. Now, if you start in PvP and you start getting gear, I think 246, 236. Help me here, Magic.
Right.
That's the one. That's the one that you can get just by taking your commendations, or whatever they call them now, and going and buying the gear. So that's kind of entry level.
That also correlates to what you can get doing naked story modes in operations.
Okay, all right. But the 230, the straight purple 230s are what you get. If you use, for instance, the level 70, boost my character to level 70, leave me where I am in the current story token, whatever that's called. I keep forgetting the name of this thing.
The master data crowd or something like that, right?
Yeah, that's the one. It'll put you there. It'll give you your ship, and then essentially give you a full set of 230s, which includes the set bonuses. So it's a nice way to step into end game play, but with very entry level gear. I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done in the gearing. So we have echoed to chat the different options. If you would like to vote, feel free to say A, B, C, D, or E. So if you want, like in chat, to take part of the in the poll as well, let us know where your highest character is. What would be the approximate gear rating of your highest character? And we will we'll talk a little bit amongst ourselves, and then we'll talk about what chat thinks, and then we will look at our straw poll for the week.
Well, and actually something that even in our discussions amongst ourselves during the week that was mentioned, I think Magic Ace mentioned it, that's actually been quite nice, is that now in game, if you just take your mouse and point it at your character
That was my
picture.
point, Redna. You said
That's what he just said.
I know, but I was going to talk about it. Fine.
Oh, go for it. Since she brought it to my attention, I think she should talk about it. Go for it.
Well, you know how you can open up your character sheet and it tells you your item rating, but you have to go through all the clicky process to open it up on someone else's. Well, now I'm sorry. So now you can just hover over their name, and the little pop-up screen on the bottom right, shows you like legendary characters, shows you their name, their guild, and it also says their item rating, which I think is fabulous when you're in a raid and you're like, man, DPS sucks, or man, the heals aren't carrying, or man, this tank is crap, or, why are they so squishy? And you can just hover over them and be like, oh, I see that gear rating. Mm-hmm.
You are to blame.
Your average overall item rating, in the tooltip.
Right. Now, I think I want to say that became a thing when they introduced Crisis on Umbara's hard mode, right? The master mode version of that, because people would be trying to do it without that 242 average rating, and so they kind of put that in place so that you can see, okay, no, we can't group with you because you are too low. But I think it's become a nice way to tell if somebody's going to wreck your ranked team or not as well. So
it's still a little bit misleading, because someone like me can be rocking like a 236 main hand weapon but have an average of like 244, and my DPS is still going to be really trash because I don't have that barrel that's giving me some significant... I'm missing a lot of tech power from the one item that provisions it. Well, two, because offhand actually do tie into, unless you're a tank. But yeah. But it's still actually nice at a glance. And what I like is, I know some people don't like it, particularly because others that are forming groups will be extraordinarily judgmental and not want to accept you. Like, I mean, yesterday, I was doing an operation. I was number 2 on the DPS charts all night long, and yet I actually had like the lowest gear rating in the DPS group. Clearly, if you know how to play your character, you can push your numbers in order to represent yourself well. Like, gear doesn't necessarily 100% translate to capability, but you certainly don't want a item number 200 going into a nightmare mode operation for any reason, because no matter how hard you try, you're not going to be able to contribute meaningfully anyway.
And I don't think anybody
take that challenge.
I don't think anybody really would debate that. Like, nightmare mode should truly be at the highest gear level we can, but My concern has always been when we start putting out there, making it that easy, is it going to be another one where everybody has to link their achievements? If you remember that back in the day where you had to have that to be able to just be able to do story mode like Operation.
I love
and
doing
like
that now.
I
Whenever elitists come out to play, I'm like, oh, okay. Link.
yeah.
You were saying?
And
I love that.
I just remember that just being just angst for especially people who are new or didn't have a guild or whatever in the game, that there was just complaints, unending complaints on the forums about people not being able to have the opportunity to learn because they would be shut out. So, I just hope that doesn't happen. I don't know if it is or not, but
I think that there will definitely be certain groups of people that do that, but across the board, I mean, generally more information is better information. And realistically, even because I wanted, the reason my average is up is because I wanted to be able to queue using the group finder, which means I needed to have 242 gear item rating. And so I started looking through my items and figured out which ones were the lowest value and then pursued replacing those ones, because that's the quickest way to jump your entire average up, right?
Yeah.
And that does make my character's overall contribution capability rise, which is fine. Story modes can be done naked. If somebody asks you for an item rating when you go into a story mode operation,
it's irrelevant.
Then you probably don't want to be a part of that group. I mean, that's what bolster and level sync is for.
My gear rating is 0. Thank you so much. Yes. To anybody new, what are we referring to? Let me make sure we make that completely clear to the newer people that are watching this. There is a thing called bolster on story mode operations where it basically it makes your gear level irrelevant and brings you up to the earliest entry level statistics. For your gear, so you can basically take part in things. Now, to do anything beyond that, you need to actually have the gear to do it. But you can jump in, and so what people have discovered is that you can just take all your gear off, essentially, and just show up and be bolstered all the way to the beginning level. And so you can have
stays on repair bills.
Yes, it does. you can have a naked story mode run and be just fine. So have fun with that.
And Redna's all about the naked. He's like, yes.
It's good times, and with the outfit designer, you don't even need to let people know that you are. It's great.
Oh, but that's the fun. Okay, you're doing it wrong, Redna. We're gonna fix this as soon as we get
until they
off
target you and do a /inspect, or they look at your average gear rating.
Oh, I'm sorry, bugged. Here, let me tell you what I am.
Yeah. Oh, my bad.
That's funny.
You're taking advantage of a bug, are you, Redna, right there?
Oh, I know.
It's working.
Another exploit. Oh no.
Dang it. I hate it when that happens. So let's get back to the question at hand here among the four of us before we go anywhere further. Basically, Redna, let's start with you. Like, take your highest level character, give us a ballpark of what your gear is rated.
244.
244 or so kind of between tier 3 and 4. Magic, yes. What about you?
On my main character that I've spent so long gearing, 248, definitely.
Okay, so yeah, you're a straight elitist tier person.
Only on my healers, okay? Everyone else is fine in 242.
Okay. Elise?
I was 233, I think, when I looked at it.
Okay, so you're almost a straight tier 2. Heck yeah.
It's higher than 230. Go Elise.
Yeah, she's been working on it.
It's funny. I have like one or two 242 pieces, but I have way more 230s than I have anything else. That's why. But it's all set gear. That's all I can say. It is all set gear.
Yeah, the set bonus, in all honesty, is probably the most important part of that. Even I think more so than some of the stats. And
back in the day when they didn't upgrade the set bonus to the next set of gear, so people would have their armorines from the previous set, but they'd have all the updated mods and enhancements.
That's why I still have 230s. I mean, I've gotten a higher level stuff like 236s that aren't set gear, but I just don't use it. Set gear until I get a replacement that's higher.
Right.
So.
Once I'm in all set gear, I don't upgrade until I get an artifact or legendary of the next one up, really. Because a lot of times the greens and blues are unoptimized as well, and who needs that kind of stuff messing your stats up?
Well, it's just a waste of credits, which is why, like, until I get a 248 on a healer, I am not wasting the credits to put something else in there or augmenting like a relic at 242. I'm like, no, if I just wait a couple more ranks, I'm going to get a 248. I've got almost enough components. I can do this.
Right.
Like, it's just so freaking expensive. I don't want to keep doing it. Screw you.
Yes, indeed.
Star Wars.
And then if I was to look at this, I would say I'm probably somewhere between 3 and 4 on my highest character. I'm working on an all 248 tank right now, which is an interesting endeavor for me. So we're getting there, I guess, between us. Let me echo to chat right now what the results of our poll were, our in-chat poll.
Mhm.
We had one entry-level gear person. What was
This
that,
is
Lisa?
shocking.
Really?
But the
I
poll
believe
results
that
we got is shocking.
Oh yeah, the
Full
the
poll, but
overall
go on,
poll is
please.
pretty wild. Yeah.
Let's hear the audience
Now,
results.
chat was what I would expect it to be. It looks like we have one person with entry-level gear, one person who's right at max, but the majority of people, I would say, at least, would be straight 242, which means that I think everyone has a character they've probably run all the way up the CXP ladder to the end and are in decently full 242 gear, I would say. And that's not hard to do, I don't think. I think that's probably why I would have at least expected the majority of people to be 242. Now,
Well, I have not gotten a single character up to 300 CXP. Just saying.
Redna, for shame.
And I haven't even cracked 200 yet on any character.
Oh, you guys hurt me.
I have
Right
2.
there. I'm feeling it.
It is a grind, that is for sure. You have to actually put some effort in to get there.
That's what
I
she
think
said.
my highest is like 140 something.
You know, and I knew you could do the snowball thing, and even that was too much of a grind. I kept thinking about it. It's like, oh, or I could go open a Christmas gift, or oh, I could go play anything else rather than throw snowballs.
That's why you
That was,
gotta
like,
do it
the
at
easiest thing
least.
in the game right now.
Yeah, you get yourself a wine and you just put your finger on the clicky button and you just sit on fleet and just stand by the GTN and just.
Yeah, but then I get out the wine, and instead I go with my wife rather than squirrel myself away in front of my computer and throw snowballs. You know.
The problem is you said wine.
I can't, what I gotta do. A bowling night.
You could make your wife throw the snowballs while you go out. See if that works. Okay, bad idea.
That wouldn't work.
Program a button on a wireless device that I strap to the underside of my dog's foot, so that while she's running around the house chasing the ball, she keeps throwing the snowballs for me.
That sounds like a macro to me.
You would almost have to get another computer to do that too, because remember you have to cancel out each other's snowballs to make it as efficient as possible.
Yeah.
Not on the overheated droids.
I'll tell you what, one thing I enjoyed doing with this recent thing when everyone was throwing snowballs, if you see somebody who's actually doing the snowball grind, I would select them, and then you have target turned on, right? You can see who they're going to throw it at next because they got the person. I'd throw a snowball at that person.
You're such a troll, Sakari.
I was having a good time.
Wow, I hadn't even thought about that. That is devious, Sakari.
Oh, yeah. And then they just
Wow.
you get it right before they throw theirs, so your cooldown is ever so slightly ahead of theirs. It was a lot of fun.
Right. It needs to be aware.
Wow.
Sakari pretends to be a nice guy, but it's all fair and level war in the game.
Well, yes,
I'm gonna remember that next year.
I'm getting wrecked in PvP. This is my only way to get revenge on the community. All right, well, let's talk about our overall results of the poll that we asked. Look at your highest character's profile. What is your gear rating? Elise, would you like to take us through the results?
So the highest rating is 248 with 177 votes. That was the number one results. 51% of the respondents.
Amazing.
Very, very. Next is the 242 with 69 votes, and that's 20%. Then the next level is basically my group, the 230.
Okay.
Job, y'all. 39 votes or 11%. And then the next category is 236 with 34 votes. And the final group is less than 230 with 31 votes or 9%.
Now,
350 people vote.
I'm blown away by these results, by the way. Like over 50% of the respondents have max gear.
I know.
Now, obviously, I'm sure they don't min max, but that's just like so absurd.
I'll bet you. Well, hang
on.
on now. I'll bet you if we asked, have you min maxed your gear, we'd probably be surprised at those results as well. Like,
well,
people
yeah,
that have
actually,
actually fine tuned their stats.
I would like to know. Like, there's two that you could get off of this. Like, okay, of the 9% that were 230 or below, or well, actually less than 230, I wonder how many of those people don't have a max level character, right? And then of the 248, it would be interesting to know if they'd min maxed. And for anybody that's curious, the min maxing means that basically you've swapped out various different enhancements in order to make sure that you've got exactly the amount of accuracy you want, and also chosen exactly how many of each type of augment you want to make sure you've got exactly the accuracy you want, exactly the crit you want, exactly the alacrity that you want, in order to basically customize that stat distribution. Because every one of these 248 items comes with a basic stat distribution, but the set pieces and weapons and offhands you can pull out the mods and enhancements and swap them in with an equal level item, but with a different stat distribution in order to
where the levels are tweaked. Where some
don't want. Right. Because like 246 we mentioned is something that can be crafted, or we mentioned that in the chat room. But 248 is supposed to be appropriately distributed, because that's the other thing too. Some of the crafted items are actually heavy in endurance, and generally as DPS or healers, you don't want the extra endurance. You want to make sure that you're getting the most bang for your buck for your heals or your DPS. Tanks are a little bit different. That becomes more interesting too, because health pool itself is actually a tank stat to be considered, and so certain tanks will choose to sacrifice certain amounts of shield or absorb or defense in order to increase their health pool, because they've done math and figured out that it's actually okay to take a hit on that stat because it's so high anyway that a larger health pool is actually more beneficial and helps to make their character less spiky for the healers and give the healers a little bit of a break.
Well, yeah, it makes you more survivable for big hits. When one odd big hit comes in, it gives you more of a chance to survive. Yeah. But generally speaking, for most other classes, and I would say probably about 80% of the way for tanks, endurance is not actually anything that you're going for. So. And
and at least we no longer, just as a side note, because I won't be describing this in our discussion deliberation portion, but you did also have to worry about min-maxing your companions back in the day. Now they're just homogenized.
I never had one of those
individuality. So.
Yeah, exactly.
I never had one min-max. I mostly PvP'd there for a while just because I needed a break from operations. I had some major drama with some raid groups that I was just tired of, and I was like, PvP, man, I don't have to be friends with anybody. Just queue in, leave, queue, leave. It's great. So I PvP'd for probably about 8 months solid, and so it never really dawned on me to try to min-max one of my companions because I just didn't run with them. So I never did that. And then once I actually was interested in it and I got some tunes with some really good gear, then they swapped him over where gear didn't matter. I was super mad. If you look at Torian's gear on Toxica, he is still augmented and he still has at the time nearly min-max gear. And then I'm bitter. I'm very
Back in
bitter
the day,
about that.
I had a friend in with the last guild I was a member of who would just spend his time doing dailies every day. That's just what he did. He just did dailies was his thing, so he did dailies, and he was rich as he could be. And I mean, like he had himself fully geared out. He had everything max gear. He had like the everything was augmented, and then his companion max gear, fully augmented. He went to levels that I would never have gone to on a companion. For me, like if you get a companion geared enough, or at least when you used to get them geared enough to where they're functional, that's where I stopped. But he was going all out. It was interesting to see.
Dude, my gunslinger had every single one of his companions min-maxed. So I had Baudar in min-maxed tank gear. And it was tank strength gear because he was a strength player, right? And then it was Risha had basically Risha was excellent, and she was my favorite because she was my alt gear wearer. So she would be min-maxed for one of my alternate DPS specs because they used to have different set bonuses, right?
Right.
Or actually, no, they had different stat distributions because you wanted to make sure that, like, for instance, virulence in the sniper, you want more crit because every time your dots crit, you get more energy back. So it helps you to prevent yourself from bottoming out on your energy. You need a certain amount to maintain that, whereas others, like I think they call it marksman. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
No, marksman is gunslinger.
No,
No, yeah,
no,
sharpshooter.
the marksman is
Sharpshooter,
sniper.
marksman. You wanted more of the alacrity because then you could get your abilities off faster, and they were all channel oriented anyway. So you just wanted boom, 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 stuff like that. But yeah, I totally had all my characters maxed out. The other thing was because I had all the T&E's gear, and so I wanted to show that I had all the different skins for it.
T&Es. All right, so we're dropping a lot of keywords here that may not be apparent to somebody who's relatively new to the game. As we enter our deliberations section here, Redna, would you like to give us a brief overall history of gearing so that some of these keywords may make sense to some people?
Yes. So originally, well, we had a level 50 cap. We had an operation. Which didn't have enough bosses to correlate a boss to a piece of gear. And then we got half of Kuraga's Palace, and then eventually we got the completion of Kuraga's Palace. But originally, actually, it was somewhat similar to what it has become again, in as much as it originally you got a piece of gear that dropped off of every boss, and it would be random, and it would be random class, and
even if you didn't have that class there.
Exactly. You could have no gunslingers, or you could have no smugglers in your group, and you would have smuggler cunning items dropping, and basically that was where you were putting it onto your cunning companion because no one in the group was using it, right?
Okay, so now you mentioned cunning. Tell us about cunning and some of the original primary stats.
So now we've got what is it?
Mastery.
Yeah, mastery. Now we've got mastery. It used to be that each of the base classes had their own primary stat. So the smugglers had cunning, the troopers had aim, the inquisitors had their
willpower, if I remember.
Willpower, that's right. And then it was strength for the warriors and Jedi Knights.
Like that, those things, that stuff, yeah.
And I remember
I was actually okay with them eliminating that for mastery, primarily because it was easier to min-max when you could pull stats off of other people's gear, when they had different items on different set pieces that were actually more beneficial for yourself, as long as you were able to keep your armoring for your set bonus. Although originally we didn't have armorings and set bonuses were non-transferable, so you never used legacy gear or even different shells if you were trying to get good gear, because your set bonus could never be transferred anywhere. That's kind of where we started. Oh yeah, and also there was no PvP gear. And in fact, anecdotally, the first character I took 0 to 50 at the time, I got to max cap. I was in a big guild that was really active. And I was like, all right, cool. What do we do now? What's next? I'd come from World of Warcraft. I'd heard of raids. I hadn't yet heard of operations in this game, which is what they call raids. And I was like, so what do I do now? And they're like, oh, well, now you got to gear up. I'm like, okay, well, where do I go to gear up? And they're like, PvP, man. You got to PvP. I'm like, what are you talking about?
What?
He's like, I mean, you can do some flashpoints, because also flashpoints and game bosses were dropping the first tier, which was the T&E's gear. So you could go up, get a bunch of T&E's gear, and then take that and PvP, and then get the better gear. And the best way to max your gear out was to PvP. So everybody was just swarming the PvP,
and it was
swarming
random,
the PvP.
right? Total RNG at the time, was it?
Yeah. Well, it was actually like a loot box. You would get a currency that you would then purchase something that would randomly give you a piece, and then you could get a higher level currency slowly over time that you could also then get the highest random piece. It was pretty terrible, actually.
Right. Oh yeah.
And then eventually they realized that random pieces dropping off of bosses on operations, which I learned about after I got my second character to max cap, was not a good idea. And also that they didn't want to be putting all of these people into PvP in order to get the best gear to show up in operations, when they really wanted to be incentivizing people to play the way that they wanted to play and then get rewarded for the way that they wanted to get rewarded, which is why we then got PvP gear. So then you would play PvP, gain a currency, and then get PvP gear. PvP had different set bonuses that were more beneficial for player versus player environment. And then you ended up getting expertise, which was also better for the player versus player environment.
Expertise was a stat on PvP gear, and it was essentially a gating stat, right? Like it would slow down your effectiveness against other players until you got it up to, I believe it was 2018 was the magic number. And I don't know early if that was how it was.
Ultimately, It was actually that it made you more effective against other players, not against NPCs.
Right.
So the gear that you got out of PvP was a lower tier. I think it was always defaulted down one. The
It
max
was like
PvP
204 or
tier-
something when I started this game.
It was
Something
always
that
one
was the
tier
first
below
one.
the highest tier of PvE, but you needed the expertise to be competitive because it made you so much more powerful against other
Players,
people
right.
playing the right.
So
in
everybody would
open
have two sets of gear in their inventory, one for PvE, and one for PvP, and you'd switch them around.
right.
Mhm.
And and then eventually we got to the situation. Well, okay, so that was it. Then you did operations in order to get the end game gear, and then you would get one tier off of story mode, one tier off of hard mode, one tier off of nightmare mode. I know that that's now called like story veteran master now, but
Right.
everybody still refers to it
I
as
still
story
call
hard.
it that too.
Okay.
Right.
So, and then it was great because you played PvP. You could get the PvP gear, and it was awesome. And really, they ultimately at first it was a bit of a grind, nothing like it is today if you want to gear up just playing PvP. But it was a little bit of a grind. But they eventually like tuned that up so that you were able to basically be able to go from 0 to full in about 2 weeks of playing 5 or 6 hours a day. That's a lot of game time, but 2 weeks is a really fast time. And certainly achievable because realistically, if you talk to any of the more hardcore PvPers, it's really not supposed to be about the gear. You want to get your gear maxed out so that when you're playing against other people, it's about how good you are, not how good your gear is.
Right.
So you really actually do want to be on an even playing ground, particularly in ranked. Although back in the day also we didn't have arenas. We only had 8v8, and you could never queue solo. That's a whole other story. We then transitioned ultimately into a system that, first we ended up level syncing all the planets, and then we started bolstering all of the operations and flashpoints, and which has actually reached us to a point where you could argue that outside of hard mode and nightmare mode operations or ranked PvP, gear is almost unnecessary.
Irrelevant, absolutely.
I mean, other than right now, they've got that the bolster and normal PvP bolsters you up to the second to last tier of gear. I think it's actually 246 even. So it's above tier 3, but below tier 4. But anyway, so until you're maxed on your gear, there's no reason to get gear in PvP. And also PvP is the slowest way to possibly gear. We've now implemented the system called CXP, which is basically no joke. You can go stand on fleet and throw snowballs at people and get the highest level of gear in the game.
That is a crap ton of snowballs, though. Let me make sure that we say that as well. I think it's probably easier to gear out doing PvP than throwing snowballs, but it is still a legitimate way to gain CXP.
You can PvP and snowball. See, you're throwing them while you're PvPing.
PvP is far still.
All right.
But to what end? Like, what's the point? Like, literally, I have taken every single advanced class from 0 to end game through all the story. Well, through all of Kotfi anyway. Naked.
Right. Gear is irrelevant, indeed.
I had starter
Now,
planet,
do
weapon,
you
and
mean
offense.
naked in game or naked real life? I think you should specify because
Yeah.
trolls like Sakari and I exist.
In
This
game.
is true.
This is in game. So I had the starter offhand and played all the way through. And this is also because we recently had a design lead whose philosophy was that you should be able to play any of the game content in the game by pressing a single button. And any other way was unfair to the gamers, which is, I think, arguably one of the dumbest things I've ever heard a developer say. But
Right.
that is the way that they were designing through Kotfi and Kotet. Now, so that was why I kind of labeled this topic in our notes as, is there even any reason for gear? This is also why I would say that my answer for, how important is gear, I'd say it's a snowball. But realistically, if you want to be doing endgame content with a group of people, then the gear is going to end up becoming important because you do need to kind of learn about how your stats work, and then you will want to start min-maxing. You don't have to be, super crazy about it, but in order to help your group more effectively, it's also part of that conversation. Like, if you want to be really serious about doing in-game content, beating bosses that other people can't beat, sometimes that means you have to, as a DPS, go and practice doing damage against the dummy so that you can learn your priority on your abilities well enough. Because, knowing how to prioritize which ability to play when will increase your DPS by 1,000 without even changing your gear. And at the same time, increasing your gear and streamlining it appropriately is also going to give you significant bonus that prevent your entire ops group from hitting enrage timers. And an enrage timer, and for those of you that aren't aware, is that a lot of these hard mode and nightmare mode bosses, there's a literal timer. Like you've got 6 minutes, and if you haven't killed the boss by 6 minutes, he gets enraged and basically does 500 times more damage, and every time he casts an ability, he's going to kill somebody in the group. You can usually stay
road. That is true for normal mode too.
Yeah, right. Some are more forgiving than others, just based on what the specific encounter is.
The vast majority of them all have an enraged timer, even.
Yes, because we find them in WoG sometimes.
Sometimes.
Every now and then.
Frequently.
Every now and then, yes, in WoG we discovered that there is indeed an enraged timer on a boss that we had no idea was there before.
And I would also like to qualify too that I really do think the min-maxing really does not come into play until you two. What is the next one then? Veteran or whatever it is now called, the next above normal story mode, whatever it's called, the next level up, I would say, is really when you need to start worrying about min-maxing. You just said that normal mode you could do it naked, so you don't need to min-max or do any of that stuff in
that's absolutely true.
Normal story mode content.
Though it is arguable that for Ravagers and Temple of Sacrifice, for those story modes, it's at least advisable to have a full set bonus and have a current tier of gear. Still not needing to stress about the min-max, but you're going to want to have enough gear. And that's mostly because they never came out with nightmare modes on those, and a lot of people would argue that actually the story mode was hard mode level, and the hard mode was nightmare mode level. Now at this stage, they've lowered the difficulty of those story modes quite a bit, but I would still argue that you need a set of gear to do those story modes, even with the bolt.
For education purposes, Redna, let me ask you this. Explain to us primary, secondary, and tertiary stats. What are we talking about when we refer to those?
I mean, honestly, I don't know that those terms even hold true anymore. It used to be that your primary stat would have been your cunning, aim, strength, or willpower. Now it's all called mastery. Mm-hmm. And then they had different delineations on that. But I think that, because it used to be that, well, heck, we used to have an extra stat, right?
Well, they dropped expertise.
We don't have a surge equivalent anymore.
Oh, there was something. It wasn't personality, but what was it? There was. Oh,
was it called surge?
Charisma.
I can't remember if that's a WoW.
Yeah, it was something like that.
It was basically when you crit on an attack, it's called getting a critical. So you have a certain chance to basically get 150% damage. Well, there also was a stat. I don't know if it's called surge in this game or is that
surge was what it was. Yeah. Surge was the one they removed.
Increase that from 150% damage, you could go all the way up to 180%. It was a hard cap at one.
Presence. Thank you, Rollbox course. Is in chat. There was presence.
Presence was for your companion.
Yeah. I'm answering Elise because we had two conversations going on for a second there. Yeah. So presence was the one that would enhance your effectiveness of your companion.
Right.
Which actually still does play a role, I believe. Presence is still in the game.
Presence is still in the game, and it'll still work to increase your companions. But your companions are so OP now, if you get their affection up, that there's really no reason to worry about it.
Right. Now, surge. So critical chance. So critical was your chance of getting a critical hit. Surge was how hard you hit when you did crit.
Right.
Right.
They've now removed that and tied that into the crit stat.
So they roll them into one, and so crit does both now. Okay.
And it used to be that crit was considered a secondary stat, and surge was considered a tertiary stat. That's no longer the case. Now it's mastery is going to be on your mods, and then any of the other stats, alacrity, accuracy, crit, whatever, is going to be your quote unquote tertiary stat, but really it's just a secondary stat. And those are on your enhancement. You're always going to have one of those stats on there, and you won't even get a mix of them. You'll get endurance, mastery, and then that stat, crit, alacrity, whatever.
Right.
It does actually end up making min-maxing a heck of a lot easier, because it used to be that you would have a secondary stat and a tertiary stat on the enhancement, and then the weight of that, like the tertiary might be bigger or smaller than the secondary. and you had to choose, and there were like you would have to say enhancement super bad, but there would also be enhancement super bad A or enhancement super bad B, and they would all have the same types of values on there, but in different values.
The different
And
levels
then
of
you
them.
had to choose which was the best one based off of where numbers lay on a mathematical curve and stuff. It was just really, really, really complicated.
Those were
Now
good times, though. I had a
now
lot of
it's
fun playing with
tedious.
that
It was
stuff.
not good times. I came in during that time, and this is why I care not about gear.
Right.
I would sit there for like an hour trying to like dithering about what I was supposed to pick. And when I started this game, you still had to gear up your companions. So like I would sit there for an hour on me, and then I'd be like, okay, I have to go. I can't even play. I'm done. So I would log out, and then I would come back and I would do my companion, and then I would log out again because I spent an hour doing something that was incredibly boring for an hour. Having to do math when I'm supposed to be having fun. And
well,
I'm
and
just
there were pieces too.
So,
like they were like, for instance, crit. You could put a certain amount of points into crit, but after a certain level, there's diminishing returns, and so there was different schools on thought as to what the ideal crit was. Because after that, then you want to once you achieve this level, pour all the rest of your points into surge or whatever,
So why don't we come into where we're at
Alacrity,
now?
Alacrity actually changed too, because originally it only had to do with cast times.
Right.
And it didn't have anything to do with channeled cast times. So if it was a channeled ability that did, more than one damage, hit, you're still channeling hit, you're still channeling hit again, it didn't impact that.
It would ruin your rotation for one, because the
then
timing
it
is
would
all
throw
bad.
off your priority lists. It didn't impact your cooldowns.
And
but
your resource
abilities were
generation
completing faster, right? Exactly, and it didn't impact your dot ticks or anything. Now Alacrity's actually changed. It makes your dots tick faster. It makes your channels go faster, which also correspondingly increases how quickly they tick for their own damage. So you don't have to time it out, like have stepped levels of Alacrity. Okay, I get an extra tick this way or whatever. It's like everything just gets faster, and it's actually generally appropriate.
It's Alacrity is much better than it used to be. That is for sure.
They got Alacrity to where they got speed in World of Warcraft. The game, when it launched the way that World of Warcraft did with their speed originally, except World of Warcraft had already made every single change that they have now made by this date in this game to make it an actual reasonable stat. So cast bar oriented people would consider putting a little bit on, but not much. It was usually derided and avoided until they fixed it.
Right. All right. So
go on.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask real quick, because we mentioned the removal of expertise from gear and the whole doing away with PvP sets of gear. Elise and Magic, apparently you guys aren't that stoked about that change. And Redna, I have no idea where you are, if you think it's a good idea or not.
I think that they launched the game without it, and they realized that was a major mistake, so they put it into the game. And then they decided to reboot the entire game, took Yoda way too seriously, and unlearned everything that they had learned.
All right. So, Elise, let me ask you, what is your general attitude on the removal of expertise?
The expertise wasn't nearly as important to me, as I really liked having the opportunity to be able to get, which is not as big of a deal, but I liked the fact that everybody kind of sort of had the same kind of gear level in PvP, sort of. I mean, the pool or the spread wasn't as big, right? I mean, it was 218 or whatever was the cap. And so if you came in and for me, it was more obtainable faster. Because, and also everybody kind of had the same set, right? It was 204, I think, and 209 or something when I started was the actual like gear levels. And then you had to take it with the expertise, right? I really it really felt like kind of in a lot of other games where like everybody was equalized. You really weren't, in a lot of other games with their PvP, everybody's kind of gear and weapon is the same. And so then it's more how you play the game that was more important. I really like that. And the other thing I did too is I used to use my PvP gear as my beginning raid gear. because you got set gear. And that was the only place you could go and buy set gear at the time is when I started. So I would level all my lower characters through PvP, and I would save all my, I can't remember what that currency was back in the day, but you know, all the stuff that you'd get by the time I got to
some
the end,
kind of commendations.
Right.
I forget what the
I
name
could
of it
buy a full set then by the time I got to, you know, level cap or whatever. And then, you know, I'd be cooking by the time I hit, you know, wasn't in lobby or
in order to get a strong end game start on PvP, you had to have been PvPing all your way decently, all the way through the leveling experience. If you had that, you had enough commendations at least to buy the vast majority of a set, an entry level, you know, and get your as close as you could of your 218 expertise, which would allow you essentially to be viable.
And so at what point actually the PvPer set was actually the best starter set for getting into at least normal mode operations that there was. And I just thought that was awesome. It made it really, it made the gear utility, and also really made me felt like I had a chance at least to compete. Now you've got people rolling in there that are like me at 233. I'm rolling in there at 233. And other people are coming in at, you know, 248. And that just kind of bums me out.
Right.
It's
like getting hit by a truck.
You get face rolled then, unless you go out there and grind. And I don't want people to have to grind to play the content they're paying for already. You should be able to play it. You paid for it. You should be able to play it when you roll in, or at least some variation therein.
Right.
That's what makes me sad.
I mean, and I think what we've seen is they've been relearning this, where they launched, you only had the boxes to get gear out of. Now they've returned to each boss in an operation gives you a different piece of gear, and across the operations, you know which things to kill to get what in order to get your gear leveled up and move on to the next difficulty level. And unfortunately, at this stage, there's nothing comparative. There's no easy way to play PvP to get geared for PvP. It is the longest process of any gameplay in the game to get the gear you need to play competitively.
You have to really, theoretically, you have to PvE to pay PvP. And there are a ton of people out there who do not like PvE and vice versa. They don't like PvP. Right. And I don't think you should ever force anybody to have to play content they don't want to play to be able to play the content they want to play.
I always think about Chuck of Bad Feeling, poor guy, who's a PvPer, and he hates that there is such a long dang grind and doesn't want to do PvE, but he has to get suckered into it, you know, in order it's awful. Right. So, poor guy.
Or else you got to go out and throw snowballs for, you know, 24 hours a day, you know, for the entire time of Life Day, which was more entertaining to me than other pieces of stuff you do to get stuff. But anyway,
Magic, do you have anything you want to throw in? Because we're getting kind of close to time.
I like that. Well, I mean, I just like that they took out the expertise. I think that taking that out was dumb. And also for someone like me who had just finally finished my third healer set of PvP gear, to suddenly it not be worth anything, and all the augmenting credits I spent was literally for jack squat because it was lower than my PvE gear.
Right.
I think it was stupid. I think honestly that they're just trying to make it the one push button game, and it just aggravated me. There was no thought and effort put into that. But I do like that with the new gearing system, they brought back the ability to swap things out like they did with Warzone comms. So what I used to do is I would get my base gear, but I wouldn't augment it or rip anything out to put it in other shells. I would keep it as it was and just PvP like that until I had enough Warzone comms. Then I would go to the upper vendor and I would just swap it right out. Once I got the highest stuff, I would then rip the mods and enhancements and armories out and put that in the shells that I wanted to look, because back then we didn't have the fancy customization where you could, do the customization designer. I should know because I re-geared like 15 sets of gear because I got really tired of my main having the same look for 3 years. So I went through it.
Effort designer was such a good idea. I can't even get
over it. If they would have started the game with that, this game would have never been as painful as it was. I will say though that I like I said, I like it now because on my sniper that I'm gearing, I've never geared a sniper before. Yay me. On my sniper I'm gearing, I'm just getting like the stuff from crates and from operations, and I'm putting it on, and I'm not putting it in shells or anything. I'm not augmenting it. I'm just waiting. And then once I get enough components, I go and swap them over just like I would at the Warzone vendor. So then I suddenly now have a sniper that has 4 pieces of 248 gear, and I didn't do near the grinding because I did all the grinding on my tunes I enjoy playing. I got components off of them, and then I didn't have to work so hard on the tunes that I don't really enjoy playing. And so then I have a bunch of geared tunes, and I only did half the work because it didn't feel like work when I was on my healers, you know? So
Right.
I really like that. That is one thing I do appreciate, because they started off wrong where they made you do the CXP grind on one tune to get 300 to get that 25%. Then they're like, hey, if you want 100%, you have to get 4 tunes of different classes to that. Grind all these tunes out. Once you get those tunes out, then you got this epic bonus and you get up there quickly. So once I got that grind done, they finally took pity on me and was like, okay, but since you worked so hard on characters you don't really like, we'll give you this. You can get components on the characters you do like so that you can gear out the characters you don't like. I'm like, oh, thanks. I felt like it was a pity thing after the fact,
Right.
but I'm grateful nonetheless. Don't look at gift horse in the mouth. Not that I'm calling you a gift horse, SWTOR. Just saying.
Yeah. There's a lot of aspects on this that we haven't even touched on tonight, but I think it's getting close to time to wrap up.
Could one of you actually
Crafting
just
set
explain?
gear. Crafting set gear.
Well, yeah. So you can't craft set gear, and quite frankly, I
I
never
know.
think that you should.
I
I think you should actually earn a set bonus, but apparently you can buy it. So, what is the superior mod enhancement drops out of CXP crates? That's the only thing I want to do.
So it's a recent change to the game. If you open up a CXP crate, you have a shot at getting a an enhancement, or I don't know if there's a mod, but I know I've seen enhancements where it's the mid-level higher
There are
than what
mods.
your current tier is. So if you are shooting for 236s, you may get a 238 or something, 240. That's better than your current gear set. But I've looked at the stat distributions on those enhancements, and although they look like they're a good thing, it's the worst distribution. Like it's the version of the enhancement where which is the health stat is the highest. You know what I'm saying? So it's terrible.
Mastery.
No, it's not mastery. It's endurance.
Oh, endurance?
Endurance is way high, and all the other stats are way low. So it's not what you want to use. And so to me, it's like, well, unless you get lucky and actually get one that's actually useful. Enhancement,
so the only question I
it's
have on
worthless.
that front is, if you're at CXP 300, can you get a 240 or 252
That'd be great.
piece?
No,
Or,
but that'd
or
be
is
awesome.
248 still the max?
Well, would you want a 252 piece that's unmin-maxed? That's the worst stat distribution
As a
available.
tank, yeah.
Well, if they're gonna give me B mods, sure, I'll take it.
Right.
But they're not going
That's
to.
what they consider bad.
Right. Yeah, the B mod. No kidding. So that's what that was. We haven't really touched on the crafting of gear so much tonight. There's the outfit designer. There's a lot of different aspects of this that we've mentioned, I guess, but that we haven't dug into. So.
Well, and it's worth mentioning that there is the augments, although to have a deeper conversation about that I think is actually more of a conversation concerning crafting as well. We'll have to do an
Right.
episode on crafting generally,
I think
because that
it's
has also
50-50
changed.
Gearing, 50-50 crafting.
And it's
Right.
it's actually funny because the other day I asked somebody, what are the mats for stims or adrenals or whatever? And so they took a screenshot and gave me stims and adrenals and med packs. And I looked at it and I was
They're
like,
all the
okay,
same.
all 3.
What?
Which makes no sense as a chemist, but whatever. It
Well,
does make it easier to make
BioWare is all about, right, combining things in different quantities. So some are more of A, less of B, or more of B and less of A, and you result in 2 separate things entirely. Sorry, it's a bad joke.
There is some chemistry behind that, but let's not get into my thermodynamics, fluid mechanics, or my organic chemistry course, please.
All right, that sounds like a good idea. Is there anything else anybody else wants to say before we wrap this show up with regard to gearing?
Yeah, I think that it's come a long freaking way, but I will say I was sad with the loss of the main stats and everything just going on to mastery. I really liked it before, and maybe it's just because this was my first MMO and I'm not jaded yet, but I think honestly I liked it better that way. That was
Right.
my preference. I hate that I can nearly put the same gear on my Marauder. If I get a drop, I'm like, oh look, mastery. and accuracy. My operative and my marauder can wear this piece of gear. Yay! To me, it just doesn't feel like I'm working for it. It just feels like they're like, here, have a piece of gear and don't cry about it. Go on, shoo shoo. Okay, thanks.
And speaking as probably the majority of the people who play this game, I am so happy that they took that away. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was actually
spending an hour sitting there trying to figure out what I was supposed to be instead of playing the game.
Right.
Sucks.
Yeah, but
So-
I worked hard. I worked hard to figure that stuff out. And I had somebody
Didn't we all?
patiently holding my hand. I had 2 guys that helped me out
Right.
through this game, patiently holding my hand and teaching me exactly what I had to
Oh.
do. And when I finally got that down, they're like, mastery for everyone.
I
mastery
would
for
get on
you."
the
And, you know,
forums. I would get on the
Dang it.
forums, and I would be looking at the theory crafters posts. You know, like
So
what's the
happy
tank stat
about it.
distribution for this? Yeah, it's simplified a lot.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Well, and Redna did mention something which is totally true. The fact that HK, because he no longer has the cunning and aim stat, like they changed everything with the gear and the companions. I can't use the assassinate protocol, so I can no longer one-shot silvers. I just want to throw that in there. I'm still bitter. I'll never forgive you, Star Wars. Anyways, thank you all for showing up. We really appreciate it. Thank you for talking in chat, for doing our straw poll, for putting up with my child running around in the background going, woo! So we appreciate it. We love you guys, and we love that you love Star Wars and that you want to come celebrate it with us. Thank you, because without you, we would be awkwardly talking to ourselves.
Yes, we would.
Thank you.
And we may be.
And thank you, Lady Danny, for all your hard work and your modding and all that stuff. Thank you so much.
Indeed.
There.
Thank you, guys.
That's true, because Lady Danny, you are the bee's knees. And that brings us to the end of the episode. The council is adjourned. If you'd like to reach us, you can email us at thecouncil@thecouncilswotor.com. You can find Elise on Twitter at abrown35, Magic Ace at the Magic Ace, with a J and a K, but she isn't just joking. Me at R3DN4, and Sakari at I am Sakari. Not me, him. Don't forget to visit our website, www.thecouncilswotor.com, and follow us on social media. Also, don't forget our Patreon page at patreon.com/thecouncilswotor. That's it for this week, guys. Conjure 100 more holocrons, an arsenal of super weapons. Nothing will stop us.
Vampire's the best.
I understand.
You are on this council, but we do not grant you the rank of master.
What? How can you do this? This is outrageous. It's unfair. How can you be on the council and not be a master?
Take a seat, young Skywalker.
Forgive me, Master.